Welcome to Jazz Piano Skills. I'm Dr. Bob Lawrence. It's time to discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Well, I hope you have been enjoying playing the improvisational developmental patterns for the primary sounds of B. And of course, exploring the various fingering patterns that we have been working on since the start of the year that require a conscious shifting of our hand so that we play with a proper jazz articulation and that we are constantly preparing the hand for continuous ascending and descending movement. It's not an easy task. I've said it many times throughout this year. It's not an easy task at all. It takes a lot of commitment, serious commitment, endurance, patience, and a whole lot more to develop proper hand movement, in addition to nailing down all the correct chord-scale relationships. So if you've been sticking to the program that we have been tackling since the start of the new year, a huge congrats. You are a member of a very small group of determined people destined, as I like to say, to achieve jazz greatness. So let's keep creating forward motion and tackle the altered dominant sounds this week for B. Altered dominant sounds referring to the sharp 11 sound, flat 13 sound, flat 9, flat 13 sound, and of course the fully altered sound, the flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5. We've done this process for C, for F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp, now B. We're on the back side of the circle working our way back to C. So today, you are going to discover essential jazz improvisation exercises. You're going to learn developmental arpeggio and scale patterns of B altered sounds. And you're going to play 5 arpeggio and scale patterns for the B dominant altered sounds of music. Again, sharp 11, flat 13, flat 9, flat 13, and the dominant fully altered. Wow. So as I always like to say, regardless of where you are in your jazz journey, a beginner, an intermediate player, an advanced player, or even if you consider yourself an experienced and seasoned professional, you're going to find this Jazz Piano Skills podcast, this lesson, exploring jazz improvisation exercises for B altered sounds, to be very beneficial. But before we get busy, before we dig in, I want to, as I always do at the beginning of every Jazz Piano Skills podcast, I want to welcome all new listeners. And if you are indeed new to Jazz Piano Skills, I want to invite you to become a Jazz Piano Skills member. Now, there are various membership plans to choose from, so check out jazzpianoskills.com to learn more about all of the perks that come along with each membership. There are educational weekly podcast packets, a sequential online jazz piano curriculum, which is loaded with comprehensive courses. There's an online weekly masterclass, an online interactive fake book, private jazz piano skills community, which you want to be a part of, which host a variety of engaging forums. And of course, there's unlimited private, personal, and professional educational support. All of these perks, all of these benefits are waiting for you, wanting to help you discover, learn, and play jazz piano. So when you have a moment, check out jazzpianoskills.com and, of course, become a member. If you have any questions, once you get there, looking at the various membership plans, if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, to contact me. I'm happy to spend some time with you and, of course, answer any questions that you may have. Okay, on to the question of the week. This week's question comes from Diana Kistner. Diana's living in West Valley City, Utah. Diana writes, I have come across the word polychord in my jazz study, and it's a concept that, at least on the surface, seems complicated to me. I am not sure of its value or purpose. I'm hoping You can validate why the concept is important, or better yet, tell me why I can forget about it and move on. Thanks for your help. Too funny, Diana. Well, you're right. It is definitely a fancy schmancy word that can cause much confusion. On the other hand, the word polychord sounds really cool, right? Especially, throw it out to say it when you're at a party. You'll sound really, really smart. So keep that in mind. But let me begin by talking to you about polychords. And let me begin by just saying that they're nothing more than a crutch, right? Polychords are nothing more than a crutch to help you get your hands on a very specific sound, right? In other words, polychords are not an approach to playing. They're in the same camp. I like to think of them as being in the same camp as modes. I always stress to folks that modes are simply an academic explanation of a chord-scale relationship. Well, polychords is an academic explanation of a musical sound played harmonically. Polychords take two chords that you are familiar with and instruct you to play them together at the same time to produce a different sound. Now, I'll explain this in a minute here, but the bottom line is this. Polychords is simply a crutch to help you get your hands on a harmonic sound. And once you know the sound, once you have the muscle memory in place to play the sound on demand, you can forget the word polychord forever, right? So let me give you some examples of polychords. Let's begin with taking a D major triad, and let's put that D major triad on the top of C dominant 7. So we get this. Okay? So what we have here from the bottom up, C dominant 7, including the D major triad, we have the root, 3rd, 5, 7, 9, sharp 11, 13. It's a beautiful sound. Listen again. So that chord that I am playing is a C7 sharp 11 sound. It has the 9 and the 13th included as well, but it's the C7 sharp 11. And I'm using a polychord to help me get my hand on the shape, playing the D major triad over my C dominant 7. Now, once I get familiar with that sound, once I get familiar with that shape of that polychord, I can forget the word polychord altogether. Because the whole point of teaching the polychord is to help you get your hands on a C7 sharp 11 sound. Okay? So you can invert that major triad in the right hand however you'd like. You can invert the 3rd and the 7th in the left hand however you wish, right? No matter how you slice and dice it, it's C7 sharp 11. So the polychord again is used as a crutch to help me get my hands, my ears acclimated to a C7 sharp 11 sound. So you see, Diana, how this is working, how a polychord is an approach, is a crutch to help you get to a larger or different sound, right? Another example would be if I play a C sharp minor in my right hand, C sharp, E, G sharp, and let's put C7 underneath that. So now I get a C dominant 7. Now I have with that C sharp minor triad, I have a flat 9, I have my 3rd, and I have my sharp 5. Let's listen to that again. Beautiful. And again, I can invert that triad however I wish in my right hand. Right? Beautiful. So a C sharp minor triad over C7 gives me a fully altered sound, which we're going to be exploring today. The C7, flat 9, sharp 5. Now, if I take another triad, and typically polychords are made up of a triad in the right hand and a dominant chord in the left hand. Okay, now if I take an E flat minor triad, E flat, G flat, B flat, I play my C7 underneath that. Wow, beautiful sound, right? Now I have a C7 sharp 9 flat 5 sound, another fully altered sound. Listen to this again. Beautiful. And again, I can invert that triad however I wish. Another great example would be G flat major triad over C dominant 7. So I have another fully altered sound, beautiful. So now I have a C7 flat 9 flat 5. And again, I can alter that shape by inverting my triad and my shell in the left hand. Another example would be A flat major triad over C7. Beautiful, which ultimately produces a C7 sharp 9 sharp 5 sound. And let me do one more for you, Diana. If I take an A major triad and play it over C7, now I have a flat 9 13 sound. And I can invert that triad. Beautiful, right? So the polychord is taking a triad in my right hand, placing it on top of a dominant sound in my left hand to produce a different sound altogether. I like to, when I was studying using polychords to help me get my hands in shape, my hands and ears on these sounds, I used to think of them as like fractions, right? So I'd do something like a 2 over 1, and I would be treating the 1. I'd be thinking of the 1 as the primary dominant chord. So in this case, it would be C7. So I'm not talking harmonic function here. I'm just creating a little fraction, a little formula to help me keep a sound, a polychord combination in sound to help me keep it in check and organized, right? So I would think 2 major over 1 dominant. And I would then think, sharp 1 minor over 1 dominant, or flat 3 minor over 1 dominant, right? These are the combinations that I just, the examples that I just gave you. So all of that to basically say, polychords, again, is just simply a crutch to help you discover various combinations of chord shapes that you're already familiar with, to get these shapes, use these shapes in both hands, right, to create a different sound. Okay? Again, once you're familiar with the shapes and sounds, the muscle memory, the oral memory, then you can forget the polychord name altogether. And what I'm trying to say is that when I think of a C7 sharp 11, I do not think of it any longer. I do not think of it as D major over C7. I did when I was learning it, but now I just think of it as C7 sharp 11, right? So I no longer think of it as a polychord. So Diana, that's a lot of information very quickly. I'm not going to tell you to forget the polychord approach or exercise, because you may find it extremely helpful when studying upper and altered extensions of musical sound. But I will tell you that you can use the polychord approach that once you have used the polychord approach to learn a specific jazz shape and sound, you can then feel free to forget the word polychord altogether. All right? And at that time, just refer to the sound with its formal and official name. C7 sharp 11, C7 sharp 9 flat 5, etc. Well, I hope this helps, Diana. And if you have any additional questions or if further clarification is needed, please do not hesitate to let me know. Right? Reach out to me. I'm always happy to spend some time with you and help you in any way that I can, and provide further clarification if needed. Okay, let's discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Let's get after these jazz improvisation exercises for the altered B sound. Okay, as I mentioned in previous podcast episodes, right? Everyone struggles with improvisation initially. And more often than not, the struggle is not the result of a lack of talent or skill or theory, understanding. It typically originates from poor fingerings, right? And this is why we have decided to take this monumental task, this monumental journey on this year, and devote the entire year to the study of improvisational patterns, melodic lines, and fingerings, right? We set out on our journey in January to discover what constitutes good fingerings, right? What should we look for when establishing a fingering for a certain musical phrase, and what should we be trying to accomplish with our fingerings? And is there always a fingering option that is better than all the other options? And what about that golden rule that we always hear about, right? Especially if we've been trained with traditional piano lessons and classical lessons, that golden rule of never, ever, ever use a thumb on a black note to begin a musical line. What about that? Is that for real? So the whole point of our journey this year was and has been to establish definitive answers for these types of questions, and ultimately circumvent any type of fingering dilemma. In other words, we want to establish a simplistic approach to fingering, right? And of course, in doing so, establish unimpaired mobility for our right hand. And that unimpaired mobility for our right hand will allow us to easily play tunes and to easily improvise. Sounds good, doesn't it? Of course it does. Because deep down, you know, and I know that if you can get your right hand to easily move around on the keyboard, you'll be able to play the tunes you love and embellish them, improvise as you wish. In other words, you'll be able to play jazz. And again, this is the entire point, the entire objective of this entire year, right? To simplify our fingerings, to establish a fingering conviction that will allow you to begin successfully practicing and establishing fingerings for all 60 chords using typical jazz patterns, similar lines that we come across and run across when playing tunes, bebop tunes especially, and improvising, right? So, and in doing so, right, this journey this year, we want to solidify a finger muscle memory that ultimately frees us up to think about things like musical expression, musical emotion, musical articulation, and of course, musical creativity, right? We do not want our fingerings to get in the way of us making music. So, all right, let's get down to business. The educational agenda for today is as follows. Number 1, we are going to explore jazz improvisation exercises for B altered sounds. Number 2, we will play essential B altered arpeggio patterns that you need to discover, learn, and play from the root to the 13th of the sound using various entry points, the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. Number 3, we will play essential B altered scale patterns that you need to discover, learn, and play, again from the root to the 13th of the sound. And again, using various entry points, the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. Number 4, I will be playing all jazz improvisation exercises today using the B fully altered sound as our model. And number 5, I will be playing all jazz improvisation exercises, as always using a traditional swing groove of 110. Now, if you are a Jazz Piano Skills member, I want you to take a few minutes right now, hit the pause button. I want you to access, download, and print your podcast packets, your illustrations, the lead sheets, and the play-alongs. Now, again, your membership grants you access to all educational podcast packets for every weekly podcast episode. And as I mentioned every week, you should be using these podcast packets when listening to this episode, of course, right? And you should be using them when practicing at the piano as well. So if you are listening to this podcast on any of the countless number of podcast directories that are out there, Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and the list, of course, goes on and on and on, then be sure to go directly to jazzpianoskillspodcast.com. That's jazzpianoskillspodcast.com to download your podcast packets. And you'll find the active download links in the show notes. Okay? And one final but very significant note that I mention every week, that if you are listening right now and you are thinking that the jazz improvisation exercises for the B altered sounds and the various skills that we are about to discover, learn, and play, if you're thinking that, wow, man, this stuff is way over my head, then I would say to you, please, no worries. Sit back, relax, breathe in, breathe out. Just continue to listen. That's it. That's all you got to do. Just listen and grow your jazz piano skills intellectually by doing just that, by listening. All right? Every new skill is over our heads when first introduced, but this is how we get better now and forever, right? We place ourselves smack dab in the middle of conversations where we are hearing words that we have never heard before. And therefore, we're forced to grow intellectually. And I say it all the time. All musical growth begins upstairs, mentally, conceptually, before it can come out downstairs physically in your hands. So all you have to do is sit back and listen to this podcast lesson now to discover and learn. The play, as it always does, will come in time. I guarantee it. Okay, now that you have your lead sheets in your hands, I want to point out just a few things before we get going. You will see that lead sheets 1 through 4 deal with arpeggio motion, while lead sheets 5 through 8 deal with scale motion. Now, you'll also notice that the jazz improvisation exercises are the same for all 4 altered B dominant sounds. The sharp 11, the flat 13, the flat 9, flat 13, and the fully altered flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5 sound. The exercises are, of course, modified to reflect the proper sound. Now, you'll also notice that my suggested fingerings are included for every note of every exercise for every sound. Okay, so now you can, as I mentioned every week, you can modify the fingerings slightly, but be careful, right? These fingerings have intentional hand shifts built into them so the hand gets used to moving. So the tendency may be to think, well, heck, I want to remove this hand shift. Yes, it might be easier initially to remove the hand shift, but you will be working against the objective that we have set out to accomplish, right? Some of these musical phrases are only a measure long and have multiple hand shifts. All right, so just keep in mind that you may end up changing a fingering thinking it's simplifying things, which really in the long run is either defeating our purpose or making it more complicated in the long run. So I'm just saying, just be careful, right? Just throwing caution to the wind. Just be careful. Okay, now that you have your lead sheets in your hands, I want you to pull out lead sheet 4, skill 4, and I want you to pull out lead sheet 8, skill 8. Lead sheet 4 deals with the fully altered sound, B fully altered, the flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5 sound, using arpeggio motion, while lead sheet 8, skill 8, deals with the B fully altered sound using scale motion. Okay? So on lead sheet 4, skill 4, you'll notice that we have 5 exercises, A, B, C, D, and E. Right? 5 different patterns that are going to focus on the B fully altered sound. Now, the entry points that I mentioned earlier that we are using, the root, third, 5, and 7. Very true, because if you look at your lead sheets for your sharp 11, the flat 13, the flat 9, flat 13, those dominant sounds, you will see that we are launching from either the root, third, fifth, and seventh. However, with the fully altered sound, we are, or at least I am in this modeling for you today, launching from the flat 9 of the sound, the third of the sound, the sharp 5 of the sound, and the root. Okay, and you'll see that will make more sense when you see it visually on your lead sheet. The fully altered scale is a wacky scale to write out, to use nomenclature. Try to use traditional nomenclature. You end up with a whole lot of double flats or double sharps or natural signs and so forth. So it's easier when exploring the fully altered sound to actually build your entry points from one of the alterations, whether it be the flat 9, the sharp 9, the flat 5, or the sharp 5. So I'm using today the flat 9 sound and then moving in thirds from the flat 9. So that's why you'll see on your lead sheet letter A there, entry point is the note C. And then we have an entry point of the E flat, which is actually D sharp, which is the third. An entry point starting on the note G, natural, which is the sharp 5. And then, of course, the entry point being the note B, which is the root. I'm going to follow that format today for both my arpeggio exercises, lead sheet 4, skill 4, and my scale exercises exploring the fully altered sound, lead sheet 8 or skill 8. Okay? All right, so let's get started. Let's, again, lead sheet 4, skill 4, dealing with arpeggio motion for the B fully altered sound, exercise letter A. You'll see I have ascending, simple arpeggio motion from the flat 9 of the sound, from the third of the sound, the sharp 5 of the sound, and the root of the sound. Straight arpeggio motion, a 4-note phrase, a 4-note arpeggio. Each one of these arpeggios, you can just see it in the fingerings. You can see there's a hand shift in each one of these patterns, right? So you do not want to play these arpeggios using 1, 2, 3, 5. I know you can, but again, you're defeating the purpose of what our objective is here, right? So let's bring the ensemble in. I'm going to play the B7. In fact, I'm going to use a polychord when I'm playing my sound here at the start of the exercise and at the end of the exercise. So I'm going to be playing a B7, and I'm going to be playing a C minor triad in my right hand. So that C minor triad gives me a flat 9 sound, it gives me the third, and it gives me my sharp 5 sound. So how about that? I'm using a polychord combination when I'm playing my voicings up front to get into the exercise and at the back end of the exercise to end. So once I play the B7 fully altered sound for 4 measures to get into the exercise, I will play each arpeggio ascending 4 times. So I want to play with a nice relaxed feel. I know these say exercises in the title, but I want you to play them as if you are playing an improvisational line or a melody of a tune. In other words, we want to be as musical as possible. Do not approach these as exercises. I know it says it in the name, but we want to be musical. So let's bring the ensemble in and let's check out letter A. Here we go. Awesome. Now, I will say this. You may be hearing a lot of tension when you hear these patterns, these musical motifs. And I will just say that when we alter a dominant sound, we are, in essence, creating tension. That's the whole point of altered sounds. They create tension. We are then isolating that tension. This B7 fully altered sound is not coming from a chord. It's not resolving to a chord. So it's just floating out there, okay? So when we take tension and we just float it where it doesn't come, it's not part of a progression, maybe a little rough on the ears initially, right? But this is the best way to practice sound and to practice fingerings for that sound is to isolate it. So just keep in mind that some of you may be listening and thinking, wow, this is hard for my ears to digest. Maybe so, initially. But I promise you, as you get familiar with these sounds, what appears to be tension now will start to actually be, the ears will start to actually go, that sounds pretty darn good. They will become acclimated to the sound, I promise. So now on to letter B. Okay, now we're just going to work off that same arpeggio motion that we just did, but we're going to add a little contour to the shape. So it's not just a straight 4-note phrase. You'll see there in the pattern we have a little contour, and each one of these musical phrases from the flat 9, off of the 3rd, off the sharp 5, and off of the root. So, okay, same approach. We're going to play and be as musical as possible. So let's bring the ensemble in and let's check out letter B. Here we go. So now, letter C, one of my favorite patterns of all because it really forces the hand to move. And you can see it in the fingerings, right? Look at measure 1. 1, 4, 1, 4, 2, 1. The hand is shifting. And not only is it shifting, but you might find your thumb up on a black note on some of these patterns as well, which is good for you. Okay. It's okay. Your classical teacher is not here. It's okay. So let's bring the ensemble in and let's check out letter C. Here we go. Right. Everything up to now has been eighth notes, right? Traditional eighth note phrases. But now letter D, as we have done all year, we have dealt with the eighth note triplet. The triplet, of course, is laced through all jazz literature, so we cannot escape it. We need to address it head on. So here's what we're doing. We're addressing it head on. So letter B deals with eighth note triplets for the entire phrase, more or less, for each one, from the flat 9, from the third, from the sharp 5, and from the root. So be careful. Again, I'm playing these exercises today at the tempo of 110. I would encourage you to, of course, to play these exercises, especially as you're getting acclimated to the sound and working out the fingerings, to play these exercises at much slower tempos, especially the eighth note triplet pattern here that I'm about to play, letter D, right? You always want to play at tempos that allow you to succeed, okay? And then gradually increase the tempo as you become comfortable with the fingerings and the pattern itself and the sound. So, okay, here we go. Let's bring the ensemble in. Letter D, dealing with the eighth note triplet. Letter D. Check it out. we are down to our final exercise today, dealing with arpeggio motion for the B7 altered sound. So take a look at letter E. You can see our musical phrase now has gotten longer. It stretches over the bar line into measure 2, but our entry points stay the same. We'll keep those variables the same all the way through, launching from our flat 9, from our third, from our sharp 5, and from our root. All right, pay attention to the fingerings. We have multiple hand shifts taking place in each one of these phrases, so just be careful. So let's bring the ensemble in, and let's check out letter E. Here we go. All right, that concludes our arpeggio work for our B7 altered sound. So now let's turn our attention to lead sheet 8, skill 8. We have 5 additional exercises to take a look at today. Again, dealing with the B7 fully altered sound. But now we're incorporating and focusing on scale movement. Okay? Why arpeggio and scale movement, by the way? Those are the 2 ways in which all melodies move. Scale and arpeggio motion. And melodies can only travel one of 2 directions, ascending and descending. Musical facts, right? Musical facts. So all my practicing, I'm always dealing with practicing specifically arpeggio motion or scale motion or some kind of combination, which we will get to later. But for right now, we have ascending scale motion in letter A. Again, keeping our entry points the same, the flat 9, the third, the sharp 5, and the root. Again, I know it says exercises in the title, but we want to be as musical as possible, right? We want to be musical every time we sit down on the piano bench and when we're practicing. So let's bring the ensemble in. Let's get the scale movement going. And here we go with letter A. Check it out. Nice. I love it. I think I mention this every time we do these patterns. Do not rush over letter A for arpeggio motion or letter A for scale motion. Being able to play ascending, descending, scale, and arpeggio motion straight up, straight down with great jazz articulation, great feel is absolutely critical, right? So do not get excited and just only run through this one time and think, okay, I'm done. Let's move on to letter B. Spend time with letter A for your arpeggio motion. Spend time with letter A for your scale motion. You'll be glad that you did. Okay, so now let's take a look at letter B. We have our ascending scale motion, but just like we did with arpeggios, we're going to add a little contour to our line now. So you can see that right from the beginning, we have a leap of a fifth and then descending scale motion followed by ascending scale motion. So we create this little arpeggio, or this contour, this descending, ascending shape to our musical phrase. We have hand shifts in there, of course, to pay attention to. Our entry points, though, of course, stay the same. So let's bring the ensemble in and let's take a listen to letter B, the B7 fully altered sound. Here we go. All right, well, we had to deal with the eighth note triplet with the arpeggio motion, so of course we're going to deal with the eighth note triplet with scale motion. So letter C does exactly that. Our musical phrase is getting longer with these triplets. We have 4 eighth note triplets that stretch then across the bar line to count 1 of measure 2. I cannot stress enough, really work through these fingerings. There's a lot of hand shifting, hand movement taking place. And again, I want to stress the importance of playing at tempos that you are comfortable with that are going to allow you to succeed. So again, I'm playing at 110 today, but I encourage you to use your metronome or create a play-along track at a slower tempo at 60 or 65, 70, 75. We want to play with proper articulation, and of course, we want to be musical. So let's bring the ensemble in. Let's check out letter C. Here we go. tough, right? The eighth note triplet is not an easy pattern to play, not an easy rhythm to play at all. But you'll get it. You'll get it. All right, so on the letter D, we're back to eighth notes again. No eighth note triplets, but our phrasing, our motif is getting longer. We have nice scale motion, got some contour in our scale movement. Of course, we have our hand shifts, and our entry points, of course, are remaining the same as well. So let's bring the ensemble back in, and let's take a listen to letter D. Here we go. Nice. Hard to believe, though, that we are now down to our final exercise for today. Letter E, exploring the B7 fully altered sound. Again, our musical phrase just keeps getting a little longer. Hand shifts, a little more intense, right? So entry points, though, always remain the same. We're dealing with and have been dealing with all day today, launching from our flat 9, our third, our sharp 5, and our root of our fully altered sound. So let's wrap this thing up with letter E. Let's check it out. And again, we want to be as musical as possible when playing these exercises, right? So here we go. Check it out. Wow. I say it every week, man. I'm like running a sprint to get through everything within an hour. And today's no exception, right? We have unpacked a ton of information in one very short and very fast hour. Now, even though I played the jazz improvisation exercises today using the fully altered sound as the model, I want to stress to you the importance of practicing the exercises for the dominant sharp 11, the flat 13, and the flat 9, flat 13 sounds as well. They're all laid out for you in your Lead Sheets podcast packet with fingerings included. Now remember, you can, like I said earlier, you can modify the fingering slightly to suit your hand, but do not be eliminating hand shifts because you think it's going to make things easier. Ultimately, it will make things more difficult, and of course, it will defeat the purpose of what we've set out to achieve here, our objective, right? You have a ton to tackle this week, no doubt, so use your practice time wisely, and next week, of course, we will explore the head of a bebop tune, all right? Closely examining the various melodic shapes and fingerings of a classic tune as well. Okay? As always be patient. Developing mature and professional jazz piano skills takes time. In fact, I think most professional pianists would tell you it takes a lifetime. So begin structuring your improvisational development after the playing demonstrations that I modeled for you today in this podcast episode, this podcast lesson, and I guarantee it, you will begin to see, feel, and hear your progress. Well, I hope you have found this Jazz Piano Skills podcast lesson exploring jazz improvisation exercises for beat-altered sounds to be insightful and, of course, to be beneficial. Now, don't forget, if you are a Jazz Piano Skills Ensemble member, I'll see you online Thursday evening at the Jazz Piano Skills Masterclass. That's going to be held at 8 p.m. Central Time to discuss this podcast episode lesson, exploring jazz improvisation exercises for the beat-altered sounds in greater detail, and of course, answer any questions that you may have about the study of jazz in general. Again, be sure to tap into your educational podcast packets, your illustrations, your lead sheets, your play-alongs for this podcast lesson, and also tap into the Jazz Piano Skills curriculum, the courses. They will help you maximize your musical growth. And you know what? Make sure that you're an active participant in the Jazz Piano Skills online community. Get out there, get involved, contribute to the various forums, make some new piano friends, jazz piano friends. Always a great thing to do. Do not be shy. Now, you can always reach me by phone, 972-380-8050. My extension here at the Dallas School of Music is 211. That number again is 972-380-8050, extension 211. Or you can reach me by email, Dr. Lawrence, that's drlawrence@jazzpianoskills.com. Or you can use the nifty little SpeakPipe widget that is nestled in on every single page of the Jazz Piano Skills website. Well, there's my cue. That's it for now. And until next week, enjoy the jazz improvisation exercises for beat-altered sounds. And most of all, have fun as you discover, learn, and play jazz piano.